He walked with a guitar slung over his shoulder, a red beret on his head, and revolution in his voice. In just 4 short years, he transformed the nation and renamed it Burkina Faso, land of the upright people, and gave hope to millions across Africa. But in 1987, his voice was silenced, or so they thought.
I recognize your fragrance, hold up, you ain't never gotta say shit, and I know your taste.
Hey everyone, it's Chloe Alexandra, and today is our very first episode of Red Case Files. This is a segment on my YouTube page where we discuss murders, mysteries, and everything else in between. And on today's episode, we're talking about Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara was no ordinary president. At just 33 years old, he seized power in a bloodless coup. And once he became president, he had the mission to dismantle the colonial and capitalist nation that his country has become. He rode bicycles instead of limousines. He sold off the whole fleet of the government's luxury cars and asked ministers to drive more smaller cars like Renaults. Sankara launched a war against poverty, corruption, deforestation, and patriarchy. In his 4 years of power, Burkina Faso vaccinated up to 2 million children, built schools, and created processes for food self-sufficiency, all without world aid. But as positive as this sounds, this type of radical change will never, as we all know, never will sit well with enemy countries. They just don't like to see us win. I'm going to present to you guys a list of reforms that Sankara enforced during his power. The first one would be that he slashed his own salary, banned luxury cars for officials, and made public servants declare their assets. You can only imagine for the elites, especially as Africans, we know how much pride the elites feel in their possessions and how much money they're making. So to be forced to expose that and to somewhat step down from the lifestyle that they're used to was humiliating for them. The second reform he did is that he stripped traditional tribal chiefs of their privileges. So no more collecting taxes or controlling land. Now that's very big in an African context because when it comes to tribal rule, this can be seen as a betrayal, as tribes were seen as their own small nations to control and do what they please. The third reform he did was he nationalized land and minerals and handed them over to quote unquote peasants. This made rich landowners and foreign corporations furious because God forbid a citizen has a piece of land from their own country. God forbid citizens can live off the land that they are birthed on. The fourth reform he did was he banned female genital mutilation, polygamy, and forced marriages, and made women's rights part of the state's policy. And with this ruling, at the time, many conservatives and religious communities saw it as an attack on their identity. But we already know what it is. It's a man and their misogyny. We know what the real deal is. They wanted to continue to marry as many women as they wanted. They wanted to continue controlling the women in their lives. They wanted to continue having child marriages. They wanted to continue mutilating young girls' genitalia. And Sankara wanted to stop all of that. The fifth reform he did was he mobilized mass citizen labor for public works, such as road building, reforestation, and school construction. So this was amazing for the locals, but really bad for like construction companies of some sorts because they're now being ridiculed of underpaying and now have to pay their staff correctly. 2 more reforms I want to get into. Stay with me. The sixth reform he did was he banned foreign aid dependency, rejected IMF loans, and attacked global debt structures, which is amazing, obviously, but you can only imagine how Western institutions, countries, economies saw him as a threat. The IMF is an organization where countries go to ask for loans or support to help with their country's needs and wants. But where does the money come from the IMF? It comes from other countries. So if countries stop borrowing money from the IMF, they're not making any money. So the fact that Thomas Sankara did not want to take any more money from the IMF definitely shook the global scene. And that's what you're seeing today with Ibrahim Touré. And lastly, the seventh reform would be he censored the opposition, shutting down newspapers and cracking down on dissent. In doing this, a lot of human rights activists and intellectuals turned their back on him when it came to this law here, With all the reforms I've just listed, Thomas Sankara called this the revolution of integrity, whereas his enemies called it a dictatorship of ideas. And when you make enemies in the palace, in the boardroom, in the village, unfortunately, inevitably, your days are going to be numbered, even if it's for the good of the country. On October 15th, 1987, during a routine government meeting, soldiers stormed the room. Thomas Sankara, unarmed, stood up and reportedly said, "What do you want? If it's me, I'm here." Seconds later, himself and 12 of his closest allies were gunned down. And what cuts it deep even further, this assassination was led by his best friend and comrade, Blaise Compaoré. Apologies if I butcher his name. This was a man that he once trusted with his life. Within hours of the assassination, Compaoré declared himself president and claimed that Sankara endangered foreign relations and the stability of the state. They buried Sankara in an unmarked grave, trying to bury him and his ideas. But something strange happened. His face started to become a popular scene on murals all over the country. His speeches on cassette tapes, his famous beret as a symbol of defiance. Sankara's presence, his purpose, his speeches, his mind, his ideas, everything about him left a global impact at the time. So much so, in 2014, the people that loved him and the children who grew up to hear everything about him overthrew Blaise Compaoré. And at that point, it felt like Thomas Sankara's spirit has returned. Fast forward into 2022, Burkina Faso is facing terrorism and corruption and exploitation, but then it was taken over by another military coup. But this time it felt different. Burkina Faso's new leader, Captain Ibrahim Touré, invoked the name Thomas Sankara. What is the legacy of Thomas Sankara? To those who are powerful, he probably died a madman in their eyes, but a prophet to those who are still currently fighting. And with their new leader, Ibrahim Touré, the world is now looking at Burkina Faso again. Will it be the rebirth that Sankara always dreamed of? The cycle happen again. Sankara's story was once erased, but today it lives on, and it lives within us. Until next time, make sure you comment, like, share, and subscribe. Stay sharp, stay safe, and remember, the future belongs to those who do not forget the past. Bye.